Welcome to the Indie PPC podcast. I am your host, Joey Bidner, and this is episode 1 of the show where we talk about paid search from the independent freelancer's perspective. And I know, yet another Google Ads podcast in this ocean of paid search media, which is why I've been so hesitant to launch this podcast for so long. But I feel that there is something to be discussed regarding talking about paid search from the freelancer's perspective. So in this show, I'm going to be talking about strategies that I use, obviously, to manage my accounts, cutting edge strategies. But I'm also going to talk quite a bit about working in the industry. I want to share my processes, how I built this business, and why I choose to work this way as an independent freelancer. So a decent part of the show is going to be talking about the industry of working in paid search, along with detailed management strategies. So the way this show is going to work is I'm going to be releasing an episode weekly, and every episode is going to be split into 3 parts. Part 1 is going to be a deep dive of a topic. This could be a specific paid search strategy. It could be a talking about a new feature that I'm using. It could be an account deep dive, some kind of strategy or topic. Part 2 is going to be answering questions from listeners. If you have a question that you want answered on the show, you can just comment on one of my YouTube videos or send me an email at info@joeybidner.com and I'll get to it on the show. And then part 3 is going to be sharing something interesting that I'm learning. So part of the job of anybody in paid search is we always need to be learning. We always need to be pushing the boundaries of what we know that works. So I'm constantly reading, I'm constantly listening to new things. So the last part of the show is going to be sharing something that's piqued my interest. It might not be a strategy that I'm using yet. It's just going to be something that I have a take on. It might also just be paid search news. It's just going to be something interesting to keep your eyes out for. So that's going to be how the show's going to work. And I'm looking forward to launching this weird thing that I'm calling a podcast. And we'll see where it takes us, right? We'll see where it takes us. It's a bit of an experiment. So seeing that this is episode 1, I figure it's important to talk about how I got here, you know? Now I know it's kind of narcissistic to take this platform to talk about myself, but I get this question a lot. I get this question of how did I become a paid search professional and how did I become a freelancer? So I figure it's important to talk about this because there is really no roadmap. We all kind of have our own journey, our own story to get there. And I figure sharing mine might be beneficial for others who are in that journey right now. So going back to before I got into paid search, I worked in the skateboard industry. I worked for about 12 years in the longboard industry, to be specific, downhill skateboarding. Started with my own skateboard brand, pressing boards in my basement, and it was successful at the local level. I also had like a small network of actually pretty successful apps. I made some mobile apps dedicated to longboarding, the longboard community, over 1 million downloads on those. So those were actually quite successful. But I transitioned from that to becoming a senior editor of a skateboard magazine. I wasn't even a writer at the time, but I loved skateboarding, I loved longboarding, and I had experience in the industry. And anyways, long story short, I became a senior editor of this magazine, this international magazine, one of the funnest times in my life, traveling around the world, writing stories about skateboarding. Transitioned from that to becoming a brand manager for an international skateboard brand. Now, this is where I had my first real job experience in marketing because part of my job at this skateboard company was all of our marketing. So I had to do event marketing, print advertising, and our digital strategy. So we didn't do that much in Google Ads, but we did enough that I got a taste of what paid search was like. And after working for that company for about 5 years, I realized that I wanted to focus more on marketing. I reached the ceiling of the industry, kind of, and I wanted to become a marketer. I didn't know where I fit yet, though. I didn't know what kind of marketing was for me. So I went back to university. I studied marketing. And the thing with going to school for marketing is they don't teach you anything about paid search. And that's because it moves so fast, they can't. They can't write a curriculum on Google Ads because it's going to outdate itself in 6 months or in 3 months. So we had one class, we had one day in our digital marketing class where we talked about paid search. And that was enough to, again, like captivate me. I thought it was fascinating. The whole, I found Google Ads really blended the customer journey as well as your understanding of your market, as well as your understanding of your customer's avatar. And it's leveraging the tools that you have to carry somebody along that journey. I thought it was so interesting. So I ended up doing a little project on paid search. And long story short, after I got out of school with no real education from paid search, I got a marketing manager position at a tech company where, like the skateboard company, I had to do a million things. I had to do all their marketing from digital to print to market research, even. But my favorite part was paid search. Running their Google ads and their Microsoft ads was by far my favorite part of the job. It was the part that every day when I woke up and went to the desk, I couldn't wait to check my results from the day before. So I had a passion for it right away. And I think that that's the important part if you're deciding to get into paid search is you need to have a passion for it because in order to get really good at it, you're going to have to teach yourself. And that's kind of what I want to get to because um, there is no roadmap for how to learn it. So in this stage where I'm at this company learning, there's nobody teaching me, right? There's a million voices out there, and it's up to you to decide who to listen to. So I started, reading every article on Search Engine Land. At the time, there weren't that many actual like YouTube channels or podcasts. I basically had the Paid Search podcast as the one real source of truth, and I still think they are one of the best out there. But I just started like listening to paid search educational content at every chance I got, even though it wasn't the main part of my job. It was a small part of the job. Then while I was working for this tech company, I decided I wanted to pursue this with more focus. So I reached out to a friend of mine who had a local business, and I said, "Hey, let me run your paid search for you. Like, I'll do it for free. Let me run your paid search for free." They had never done it yet. And I'll do it for free because I need the experience. Because I wanted another business to try things on. Because when you work for one company, you can't use the platform to its full potential. Especially with B2B tech. I couldn't use Google Shopping, for example. I couldn't do a lot of the things I wanted to do. So I wanted more experience. So I decided to run ads for my friend's business for free and got him a lot of success right out of the gate. It was a really great experience. Ran that for a while, and then I realized like I wanted more. I needed more accounts. I wanted more experience. So I left the tech job, the comfy tech job, and got a job at an agency. And working for an agency was extremely valuable from the context of getting boots on the ground experience. I had to manage 40 accounts on my own, each of them with direct face-to-face contact with clients, which was awesome. Like I needed that FaceTime with clients because a huge part of working in paid search is communication, right? How we communicate the things that we're doing, not only to prove our worth, but also to get the information we need from the client to set realistic goals and to execute the right strategy. Communication is like the heart of it all. And that's one of the things that I'm so grateful for when I worked at this agency, because it gave me that FaceTime with clients. Now, I won't lie though, I freaking hated working at this agency because working at an agency is really facilitating sales. It was clear to me that this job was all about using the least amount of company resources to actually manage the ads and facilitating sales to sell more. And that bothered me because it truly got in the way of me being able to do a good job. And I kind of relate this to, I don't know if any of you have seen that show Office Space or the movie Office Space. It's this hilarious 90s movie that talks about this guy who hates his corporate job. And there's this obnoxious boss that always wants him to make these PTS reports. You don't even know what PTS reports are, but they're useless. It's a useless report. And it drove me nuts that working in an agency meant doing a lot of useless reports that just gave the salespeople, who usually didn't even know what the heck they were talking about, data for them to try to explain the worth of what we're doing to just sell more, as opposed to just allowing me to have the time to do a better job in the accounts. Anyways, we're going to go into that more detail in a future episode. But I moved to another agency, got a senior position at another agency, and it was more the same. It was even worse, actually. I went to this other agency with a really big position, actually, as a senior ads manager, managing a team, but inherited these massive accounts that were managed in archaic strategies that I wasn't allowed to change. And again, more just facilitate sales. So after the second run at working at an agency where that was the experience, I decided I just want to do the work, right? I just want to do the work that I love doing, which is helping businesses, helping them grow with paid ads, right? So I decided to just go freelance. Now, in the time that I worked at the agency, I picked up a couple small clients, right? I had about 5 clients, mostly local businesses, all around the $2,000 monthly spend amount, not big clients. But I had enough that, okay, like I have a bit of momentum. And that was enough for me to step away from the agency and commit to freelance. Now, this was actually at a very scary time because I had just moved from Canada to the United States. My wife got a job in Boston, so we had to move to one of the most expensive cities in the country. And that's when I decided to split off and do my freelance, launch my freelance career. And I got kind of lucky actually. Right out of the gate, I picked up some more clients, and I get this question a lot too, like how do you get more clients? We'll get into that in another episode. But really, it comes down to doing good work, right? When you do good work for a client and you're honest and transparent and you communicate well, they recommend you to their friends because business owners have friends that are business owners. So that's how I've gotten majority of my clients, but also, guest featuring on shows, podcasts, LinkedIn. I actually got a couple big clients in this time on Facebook, a Facebook page. I don't think there are any Facebook PPC pages anymore. Anyways, now I digress. But long story short, I decided to transition from the agency to freelance, mostly because of this hatred I had towards the corporate structure of devaluing operations, being us paid search managers, and putting all their weight and all their importance into the sales teams. That was my main reason initially for transitioning over to freelance. And I'll say the interesting part about being a freelancer is its flexibility. One of the things that also really irritated me about working at agencies is they're so rigid and slow moving in an industry that moves so fast, right? When a new campaign type launches and you want to try it, you want to experiment, you want to use some new features, in my experience at these agencies, it was, oh, we have to create a system for that first. You can't just throw that into the account. We need approval. And I like to move fast. I like to try things out, test them right out of the gate. So that's another benefit of freelancing is we're able to pivot and move fast. So we're going to get into more of that in future episodes on the value of being an independent ads manager and being able to pivot. But I guess just circling back to this journey of working in paid search, it all comes down to being able to teach yourself. That was one of the skills that I guess I got from. It was something actually that a professor said to me once. It was before I went to university. Actually, I went to college for a couple years for this small business entrepreneurial program. And I had this one professor that said something that always stuck with me. And he said, if you want to become a professional in something, it's not just about the 10,000 hours. It's about being obsessive in your and how you surround yourself with content for the topic. He said like you should be reading and listening to every piece of content that you can to educate yourself. And luckily for, luckily for me, I'm a pretty like obsessive person. And I think that that obsession on, waking up in the morning and I can't wait to listen to the new episode of this podcast or read this article, like that's been one of my biggest assets. If you're slow to want to learn the new thing, that can get in the way of your journey of growing in this industry. So I think that that was probably one of the biggest assets I had in growing as a paid search professional was just like my hunger to constantly learn. And I'm still like that, right? Like even though I consider myself a professional, I'm still always willing to prove myself wrong through other people's input and experience. And I think that that's a really important part. You got to be able to not just get complacent with what you know works. You need to always be willing to challenge yourself and just, you know, not just challenge yourself, but be willing to listen to something new. And this actually comes back even not just listening to something new. Sometimes there will be a podcast episode about something that I know. Let's say it's an episode that someone's talking about bid strategies. I know all the bid strategies, but I'll still listen to it because maybe they'll explain it in a way that I hadn't heard it before. It'll pique my interest because of the way that that person said something that maybe will allow me to explain something to a client better. Always be willing to relearn something you already know. That's another important part about working in this industry. So now I'm starting to digress a little bit, but and I want to transition to the next part of the show. But I hope that weird explanation of me walking you through my journey to get here was again, this is my first go at this podcast thing, so I hope it's coming across as concise. It'll only get better though. I know I'm kind of blabbling on a little bit, but all right, so now we can move to the next portion of the show, which is question from a listener. So if any of you, again, want a question answered on the show, just leave a comment in one of my YouTube videos or send me an email at info@joeybidner.com. So even though I just launched this show, I do already have a question. I had put a couple videos up on my YouTube channel and somebody dropped a question in one of the comments. So here we go. So this is from OMGG5TK. And OMGT5TK says, love the channel, Joey. I have a question. I sell jewelry gifts with a meaningful message card. Some personalized with names, others non-personalized. For example, birthday gifts from grandma to granddaughter, ages 10, 16, 18, 21. Should I put both personalized and non-personalized necklaces in the same Google Ads search shopping campaigns or under different ad groups or create separate campaigns for each? So this is a great question. I love talking strategy because I feel like it's honestly the first part of the greater strategy of any account, and it's such an important one. So let's break this into two. I'm going to talk about shopping first, then search, because the structure will be different depending on different factors. So when talking about shopping, first thing I'll say is don't separate them by campaign. The only reason you want to separate by campaign ever is really two purposes. One, geolocation. If you have different geolocations you want to target for different products. Let's say if you wanted to target product A to the west coast of a country and product B to the east coast of a country, or two different countries, or if you have budgets split on different countries, that's the only time that you want, that's one of the only times you want to have a campaign separated. Or if you had very specific uh, budget constraints. So sometimes I'll have different campaigns for completely different categories of products that have their own subcategories. So like let's say for example you sold jewelry, personal, non-personalized, and you also sold shoes. Shoes of a bunch of different types of shoes. You would have two different campaigns, one for shoes, one for jewelry. Each would have their own subsets of ad groups and each would have their own budgets. But in this case, you got one general product category with two subdivisions. So I would have one campaign to start with. Now, the decision on separating them by ad group should come down to one, the average order value for these two segments of products and if they're vastly different, or your profit margins. Now, because of the way shopping works, where every product generates its own search terms based off of the product data in your shopping feed, you don't necessarily need to segment for by ad group for the purpose of separating your search terms like you might do in a search campaign. Each product is kind of like its own little mini ad group, right? But the reason you'll want to separate them is if you need control over the bidding due to, again, the average order values being different or the profit margin being different. So I assume personalized stuff is more expensive and maybe you get a better profit margin, maybe not. But if it's more expensive than the non-personalized and by a big margin, let's say it's like twice the value, then you'll want to separate them so you can have different bidding thresholds. If you're doing manual bidding, maybe you want to bid more for those more expensive products. If you're doing automated bidding, if you got more, if you make a better profit margin on a certain product, you'll want to have a lower target ROAS on that ad group. So you can, one, drive more traffic to it, but also you'll have a lower threshold of what you can afford. So you don't need to have such a high T ROAS to break even, right? So I would say for shopping, separate them by their average order value and or their profit margins. When it comes to search, this one has to do with the structure of your website. If you have a dedicated page on your site for personalized and a dedicated page on your site for non-personalized as the general categories, then yeah, I would separate them. And if you see also vastly different search intent, I've done a little bit of jewelry accounts before, and I know there is a difference in search intent. People will search for customizable necklace, or there's that term for signets and stuff like that. So in that case, yes, you'll want it separated. But if they go to this, if it's all going to the same page, that's when I'll usually consolidate things, just because you'll be able to do the bidding and search term segmentation at the keyword level. So I usually let my ad group structure, let it get dictated by the structure of the website. I will, having somebody search for a personalized item, seeing that personalized ad copy and going to a page that shows your personalized products, that's the perfect searcher's experience. So I'd recommend that. Separate them by ad group if you have a page for each. And for shopping, separate them by ad group if the average order values or the profit margins have a wide enough gap. So again, if anybody wants to submit a question, just add your question as a comment on this YouTube video or email me at info@joeybidner.com. So in this next portion of the show, I want to talk about an article that caught my attention. So this is an article from Maggie Humphrey. She is a paid search strategist at Cypress North, which is an agency that actually runs a really great podcast called Marketing O'Clock, one of my favorites. And Maggie released this article that really flipped something on my head, because it was talking about a strategy, a new form of a strategy that I previously completely discredited. And I love these kinds of articles, ones that make you question your own beliefs in how something works. So Maggie's article, I'm going to link it in the show notes, but it's called How to Use Performance Max for High Customer Acquisition and Retention. So Performance Max in general, by the way, we're going to talk about in other episodes. Sometimes I use it, sometimes I don't. That's not what we're talking about here. We're going to be talking about this setting in Google Ads to steer the algorithm in using your historical data on the conversion actions, the conversions that you have from your high value customers to chase new customers of high value, or to re-engage lapsed customers of high value. So lapsed customer is somebody who bought from you in the past but hasn't bought from you in a long time. And Maggie talks about these new settings only available in PMax right now that really got me curious. So the big difference here in this setting, that we've seen this setting before of in your smart bidding strategy campaign settings, or for any campaign really, You'll see bid for new customers only or bid more for new customers. And previously, I did not like this strategy because it was never clear from Google on how long they consider a customer a customer. The way it works is you upload your customer purchase lists, which are basically just your conversion actions, right? So they know who converted, and if they see someone has converted on that list, they won't serve ads to them. But it was from my understanding that it was only used for like a 30-day period or even shorter than that. Now I can't confirm or deny that, but that's what I had heard it was. So I kind of and I tried it in a small capacity and didn't see any benefit, so I discredited it. But Maggie talks about these new settings in PMAX that I honestly find quite interesting. So in terms of customer acquisition, you no longer have just bid more or bid only for new customers. But you have this option to bid more, bid only for new high value customers. So you can take your customer lists and segment them by the highest value purchasers. So I would use maybe Klaviyo. If you've got Klaviyo is a really great email platform that allows you to slice and dice your products, your customers by what they bought. And you can segment just the high value ones. Or I'm going to start using Ad Beacon for this soon as well, another platform. We're going to talk about what platforms I use in another episode, but just want to talk about how you can slice this data up. And you can import your high value customers. And what you would do is you would create an incremental conversion value for this customer. So the way it works, it kind of tricks the algorithm. You say customers that are of this high value are worth $100 more. So when you get a conversion, what's going to happen is going to add $100 to that person's conversion, and it steers the algorithm in that direction. It's a little bit weird because it inflates your conversion action. So you need to convey this to your client in reporting. But this is how we trick the algorithm to go after something that we give more weight to. So again, we're going to go into that in another episode because I use value-based bidding in some strategies that use that similar idea of inflating conversion values to steal the algorithm. But anyways, I'm digressing. What we're talking about here is uploading new high-value customers. And that's the interesting part. You can say just go after new customers that are of this higher value segment, and Google will basically find the similarities between them and try to find you customers of that high value. Anyways, I won't get too into that, but and then the other part again is re-engaging re-engaging lapsed customers. And it's got the same thing. You can upload your high value lapsed customer lists, add that bid modifier, go after them, bid more for them. I just find it's really interesting. And she talks about in this article how to, it's quite a detailed article. She talks about how to segment your campaigns to create lapsed customers, a lapsed customer strategy, as well as a new customer strategy. She even talks about how to observe and convey the reporting. I haven't tried this yet, and I'm maybe not even doing a great job of explaining it because it's new to me. But I just found it really interesting. I found it really interesting that we have this high value new customer acquisition goal because that's a big part of any Google Ads strategy is not just going after the conversions, but going after new customers. And I use a lot of third-party platforms like Northbeam or AdBeacon to monitor my new customer acquisition, as it's one of the most important things in Google Ads. We cannot get complacent with just conversions and just think that, oh, any conversion is good. No, we always got to monitor our new customer pipeline. And what I like is that Google is at least giving us more tools. If they're effective or not, unknown, but they're giving us more tools to try to go after more new customers. Yes, it's probably just going to increase your bids and benefit Google that way, but it's worth testing and seeing if, if you have a problem where you've got a lot of conversions, but not a lot of new customer growth, trying something like this could help. Now, we're going to talk about new customer growth in another episode because I have my own strategies on how to do that. But I wanted to share this article as it piqued my interest, and I love that it made me question what I thought was true. So without further ado, that is episode 1 of the Indie PPC podcast. I hope my rambling and babbling didn't bore you all to death. Who knows if there's even anybody listening at this point through this long episode. But I want to reiterate, if you have any questions you'd like answered on the show, please leave a comment on the video or send me an email and give me your feedback. I mean, I am learning as I do this. I'd love to hear your feedback on what I am doing right, what I'm doing wrong, what you agree with, what you disagree with. Call me out on if I say too much. I don't know. This is all for funsies. So I hope that you learned something, and I'll see you next week. Bye bye.